boat, they're located at a marina or mooring area established by the department. Right off the bat, there aren't any mooring areas established by the department in Georgia. The intent of this law when it went into place was if you're going to live on your vessel, you're going to live on your vessel in an eligible marina. So all those folks living on a vessel away from a marina right now are actually in violation of the laws that exist today. That's something a lot of people haven't seemed to grasp. It also said that 288 paragraph F said that if you're in a marina, you can stay up to 90 days without having any interaction with the state of Georgia right now. Beyond 90 days, we have a free permit that you're eligible to receive through request from the Department of Natural Resources. The other important thing is that through the Coastal Marshes Protection Act, these are civil penalties. If you're in violation of one of those, it's a civil penalty. So I have to go to an administrative law judge in order to impose any sort of fine or action against a violator of the law the way it currently is. That's the law. Let's look at the rule as it currently exists for liveaboard vessels. We regulate that again through the Coastal Marshes Protection Rules, which are on the right page. There's two rules. One is the regulation of marinas, community docks, and commercial docks, and it basically says the same thing that the law does with regard to a liveaboard being able to be at one of these facilities up to 90 days before it's required to have a free permit from the state. And the second one, the extension of liveaboard privileges, actually lays out what is an eligible marina. In other words, the sewage capacity that marina has to have in order to be an eligible marina. It basically needs a CVA, a clean vessel-like pump-out station, and the capability to maintain that sewage, or to put it into the septic system. It also establishes the criteria whereby you apply for one of these free permits to live beyond 90 days. That's current rules and current law. There's been a lot of challenges over the years in actually enforcing this. First of all, nobody does it. Out of the entire state, this year we have 11 folks who requested and then granted an extension, a free extension. We know there's lots more liveaboard vessels in an eligible marina who could qualify for these free permits, but they simply don't get them. The 90-day allowance based on our law enforcement's recommendation is nearly impossible. They would have to, in order to enact any sort of violation against a boat, they would literally have to determine that boat has been there 90 days in a row. And it's almost impossible to do. It's not almost, it is impossible for our law enforcement to be able to do. We also get a number of comments from complaints from homeowners about proximity, about noise, and about raw sewage. One of the comments came in asking for how many, and that's on us, right? We don't document, we should, but we don't document the complaints that come in. But they're fairly frequent complaints, including Friday a week ago of a local marina that had liveaboards in it and one was dumping raw sewage. That's the type of complaints that we get, generally speaking. The other thing is, as a boat goes through its life, right, so it's a nice pretty boat, when it's bought, it gets sold by 3 or 4 owners, and we sort of lose contact with who the owner is, that boat becomes abandoned, and eventually that boat becomes derelict. Right now we've got roughly 130 vessels on the bottom in the state of Florida. More than half of those are commercial boats, I get it. But there's still also a large component of recreational vessels that have gone through the abandoned and now derelict process. They're sitting on the bottom. And some are navigational hazards, some are aesthetic issues, but they're all hazardous for the environment. So, we also received a lot of comments about the idea that we were trying to go after no discharge, and so I threw that into the challenge here. I want to make sure that you understand that EPA does allow a state to regulate houseboats. In this case, we consider that houseboat a liveaboard. It does allow us to regulate them through Section 1322 of Title 33. In other words, we can regulate the discharge of those vessels. The other thing is that every Atlantic coast state, except for Georgia and Delaware, has some form of a no-discharge zone that U.S. transient boaters pass through. The states of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, all of their coastal waters are no-discharge. So if you're a transient now and you pass through those waters, you should be aware of those regulations. So what Georgia's trying to attempt by regulating its liveaboard vessels and its no discharges is nothing new to the Atlantic states in the areas that you cruise. So, with that, 40 drying out, I'm only in slide 3. Where am I going to be when I get to slide 20? You have to know my presentation style. I make too many jokes, so my apologies. With that, I think it's really important that you guys understand what the new legislation that just passed, House Bill 201, what it says. So that's where we're going now. So first of all, this is what's known as a legislative declaration, right? So the General Assembly finds and declares. And I highlight the important part here. Well, it's all important. Anything the legislature writes is important. Right. But so it's to protect and enhance the quality of the waters of the estuarine areas by requiring greater environmental protection than is provided pursuant to 312 of the Federal Water Pollution Control Act as amended. Now that's now known as the Clean Water Act, right? Since 1977 it's been known as that, but our laws go back much further than 77. So this language picks up from our older laws. So the Clean Water Pollution Control Act, such that any discharge of sewage from a living-water vessel into the waters of such areas, such estuarine areas shall be prohibited. So that was the declaration of intent. Now we're going to kind of move through the bill, and it's only a few paragraphs long, kind of move through how they got to that point. The first section, section B, is really just a bunch of definitions, whether it be the anchorage area. We'll talk about that in more detail later. What's an eligible facility? In short, that's a facility that has a pump out station. Estuarine areas, pretty obvious, right? That's salt marshes out here. The living-water vessel basically capable of navigation and is under average Georgia wind and is utilized as a human abode, and then basically what nighttime means, 30 minutes before to 30 minutes after. The law did authorize two things here. The Board of Natural Resources and the Department of Natural Resources are two separate things. Think of it as the board being the CEOs of the department. The Board of Natural Resources creates rule. The department creates administrative orders. So the Board of Natural Resources is authorized by the legislature to create these overnight or long-term permits, overnight long-term anchoring within estuarine areas of the state and to establish anchoring permits. So we're going to talk about what the board's doing through this rulemaking process. The department is authorized to establish anchorage areas. Although that's not part of this rulemaking process, the anchorage areas, we're still going to talk about those in a few minutes as well. It also said that for any vessel, not just the billboard, for any vessel, it says that it's unlawful for any person to dock or anchor at night any vessel within the estuarine area of the state unless it's in an anchorage area established by the department and it's in compliance with the rules and regulations adopted by the board. Again, the board and the department. Or if it's at unless it's at an eligible facility. I'm trying to get that right. If you are at an eligible facility, i.e. a marina with a pump out station, you don't have to interact with the department. There's no reason at all. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. It also creates an exception clause that if you are, anchored overnight, but you're actively engaged in fishing or some other activities, that you don't have to get this permit. And it also says that if your vessel is docked in a private recreational dock or a non-eligible facility, that's fine. You just can't use it as a living room because there's no pump out facilities there.
I know you said there was no question and answers, but I have a question about that. If a fishing vessel is docked overnight, or they're there anchored overnight fishing, I would think they would have to go to the restroom sometime in that 4-hour period. So what would they do in that case?
So again, we can go off into a million splinters, and I really don't want to do that, right? But for this, it would be if you've got that head and you've got the galley and you're in a little board, that's where this rule comes into play. If you're actively fishing, it happens every day, all around the place. The intent is your impact is not as great as if you're living on your vessel. If you're fishing overnight, it's not as great as you're doing that. And it can go off in a million places. That's why I don't want to get big. So, excuse me. In the event that Mr. Longwater, I want to roll on through.
Just one quick question.
So, yes, sir.
Are you referring to commercial vessels or recreational vessels only?
I believe this one was referring to recreational vessels, correct? Your question was regarding recreational fishing vessels.
No, either one.
So commercial fishing vessels are going to be exempt from this.
How about commercial vessels?
And
What's the difference in their waste and?
the reason for that is someone pointed out to us an 1893 Supreme Court ruling that said we can't regulate the anchoring activities of commercial or interstate vessels. And so there's exemptions that will be placed in for commercial educational activities that are interstate or commercial. Not that I want to, it's what the law is. So, without us digressing, let me continue to move through. There's also a clause in the law that says that if any part of our law is found to be in violation of the Water Pollution Control Act, then the Water Pollution Control Act is the controlling act. So there's a lot of concern out there that this junk trumps the clean water, and if a court of law finds that to be the case, then that law will control. There's a 7-day safe harbor provision for dangerous weather or mechanical issues. I'll point out that the U.S. Coast Guard currently maintains 2 safe harbor areas in the state of Georgia. One's at Isle of Hope Marina, one's right here at Morning Star Marina. And the provision there is a 2-day safe harbor. So we feel like we're allowing for 7 days, which is a greater safe harbor claim than the U.S. Coast Guard does. And finally, there's the exemptions that are in the law, which are granted by the Department for Commercial and Educational Activities. The law is set to become effective January 1st of 2020. So our goal is we need to get our rules in place by the time the law comes into place. So, with that, let's talk briefly about our proposed rules. Well, I apologize, I didn't scroll through the last slides today. That's something y'all can tell me, I need to scroll forward. Let's talk a little bit about our proposed amendments to the rules. If you'll remember, I told you we currently manage liveaboards through the Coastal Marshes Protection Act, which is a civil act, right? So we are moving them out of the Coastal Marshes Protection Act and into boating regulations, which basically makes them criminal, the same way that fishing regulations are. If you have an undersized, out-of-season fish, it's a criminal violation. It's a misdemeanor. This will be the same way, just like a parking ticket is, and I see your reaction to that. It's the same way that a parking ticket is established. It's a misdemeanor. What we're doing here is we're striking the portions of marinas, community docks, and commercial docks that have the liveaboard attached to them. That's coming out of those rules. And then 391.2305, which is how we write the exemptions, that's coming completely out of the rules. So then we move into a whole new section of the law, boating regulations, and this is creating a new 391.4523. And that is going to be titled Overnight and Long-Term Anchorage Permits. And so this is what we have published and what you guys have been reacting to. It first says that no person shall anchor or dock in estuarine areas at night unless it's in an eligible facility or in an anchorage area with a valid permit. It says that you don't need one, and just reiterating that if your boat is docked somewhere but not being used as a liveaboard, if you're anchored and claiming safe harbor, and while you're fishing or a similar type of activity. But it does apply to all vessels. Then it establishes the anchorage permits. And we thought that having a variety of permits from a day, a week, a month to a year, that's right. By having those options available, that was the right way to go. $5 for a day, $20 for a week, $40 for a month, or $240 for a year, offering senior citizens, military veterans, and disabled veterans a 50% discount on those. They'll be available anywhere we sell hunting and fishing license. That's on the phone, that's over the internet, that's here in person, that's at our stations. The company that sells those hunting and fishing licenses also sells your boat registrations now. It's the same company. If you have a short-term permit, keeping it on your phone is all you need to do. Just having your number there, so if a law enforcement officer were to inquire, you'd have your number. if you are a long-term permit, a month or a year, and you leave your vessel, it requires you to basically to print it and post it in a window. So if a law enforcement officer rolls over, they're able to see that you got your permit. It also certifies that if you have this permit, that you're going to lock the seacock on your vessel and not dump your sewage, and it reiterates the permit exemptions. And then finally, you would be able to find the proposed anchorage areas or exclusion zones on our website. So that's the proposed rule. What we found out through a lot of the public comment was that we didn't give enough detail on things like where the anchorages would be. And that was, I'll say that was partly an oversight, partly by design, because it wasn't part of the rulemaking process. So, with that, I want to talk briefly about these proposed anchorages. Think of it this way. We're not telling you where you can anchor. What we want to do is say where you can't anchor. And some of them are pretty obvious already. The first one on the list is marked navigational channels. That's a no-brainer. That's already U.S. Coast Guard regulation. Marked navigational channels. The second one is our shellfish lease areas. Shellfish, if you haven't read the papers in Georgia or the internet recently, shellfish is posed to boom in the state of Georgia. We had a very good bill passed this past legislative session that's going to help us enable our shellfish industry to grow. In doing that, water quality is paramount. We have great water quality in the state of Georgia. We want to keep it that way. So one of the things that we're proposing, again, through administrative order, not through the rule, but through the administrative order, is that we establish a distance away from our shellfish areas. Our public picking areas are currently marked, all of them are marked. Our private leaseholders, public leaseholders on both public and private lands, they're not as marked as well as they should be. But I promise you, by the time we settle where we're going to be on these distances, they will be marked better than they are now. And then finally, a regulation about how far away from a structure that you could anchor. And this is driven mainly by public complaint about vessels anchored too close to their own docks. It's also driven by some marinas, where vessels anchored too close to the marina hinder boats from coming in and out of the marina. And so, excuse me one second. Robert, you don't speak before crowds for very long. You dry out in a hurry. So you will see that there's been some boards, some public information requests that we responded to, and we haven't settled on the distance. We've talked about 500 feet, we've talked about 1,000 feet, we've talked about 2,000 feet away from the structure. And in all of this process, we realized that there needs to be some very, not that we didn't carefully consider before, but distances around marinas, right? So 1,000 feet may be too far, because if you're in your two-person dinghy and you're trying to provision back in and not so great a weather, that produces a hazard to you, right? And so we get it. But if you're nowhere near a marina, you know, anchoring 500 feet or 200 feet away from an individual's private recreational dock may not be the best thing for you or him either. And so over the course of the next couple of months, we need to settle on what those distances are. And as we talk about the comment process in a minute, I wouldn't mind hearing what your comments and thoughts are on what appropriate distances should be. We know that in Florida, and we've looked very heavily at the other states. We know in Florida, though, that within, say for a marina, for instance, there's a 150-foot state rule, but the municipality is able to push that out to 300 feet. Perhaps that's more along the lines of where we need to be looking around a marina, some safe distance away that allows vessels to come in and out of that marina, but not be overly dangerous to you in your dinghy getting there. So keep that in mind on acreage areas. Now I'm going to show you. Yes, sir.
Did I hear you say municipalities could control that distance?
If my understanding of Florida law is that they've allowed municipalities around those marinas to be able to regulate the distances around it. So,
No, but I won't bring it up now.
okay.
I'll talk
All right.
about it later.
So what I want to do now is show you a couple of examples, right? They're small maps. It's a small screen, right? When you see this on your internet at home, you're able to zoom in on it, you'll be able to pick out exactly where they are. I'm gonna walk through 4 examples of our 8 estuaries, or 9 estuaries that we're gonna look at, and how they relate to cruisernet.com. There was 28 or so safe anchorages that cruisernet recommends in the state of Georgia. So as we go through, you'll see them as these dots, right? So if it's a green dot, and this is based on 300 feet and 1,000 feet of a structure or of a shellfish lease area or a public picking area. And I'll show you that, I can't tell the colors. I don't know if y'all can tell colors or not, but, so that is a leased shellfish area, and that's a public picking area, okay? So that'll be the same as we move through all of them. The dots are the cruisernet anchorage areas. The pyramids, or the triangles are marinas that have pump out stations. Now, one of the comments that we got was, you know, Georgia needs to be part of the Clean Vessel Act. You need to have pump outs. Well, we've been issuing CVA grants for about 7 years now. We've got 19 pump outs in the state, realizing there is a hole in the middle of the state. I get it. 17 of those are ones that we directly help pay for that. So we've been part of the CVA for a while. But so anyway, as you go through, that's the things to look for. If it's green, our recommendation of 300 feet or 1,000 feet won't impact it at all. If it's sort of green with a red circle around it, that's the 1,000-foot restriction, or if it's a solid red, that's a 300-foot restriction. So this is in the planning process, okay? It's not carved in stone. It's actually a digital image that can go away pretty easily. But so you see them there. This is for St. Catherine, Sapelo, and Doughboy. And you see this, again, McIntosh County, right? The large area that is in McIntosh County that is currently under lease to shellfish farms. Then it's Altamaha and St. Simons. You see the areas back here, the cruisernet suggests is good anchorages and are affected. And then St. Andrews and St. Mary's, the same way. A number of them that are completely unaffected by the rule. But you do see some that are right up against these lease picking areas. So as we narrow down what these are going to be, this is the kind of thing that we really need to take into account, right? As our industry grows, we want our industry to be able to grow, our shellfish industry to be able to grow, but taking into consideration the boating public, right? So there's a lot of things that, even through that process, through the shellfish process, that we'll be interacting with the public on.
So, even though Chatham County is technically part of Georgia, it wasn't shown on those maps other than a little bit of Warsaw.
So again, these are representative samples, right? So here's the Savannah River, Tybee Island, right? So
where's the Savannah River?
Right there.
Okay.
Okay, and so that's the public pit area along Highway US 80, right down. That's the area along US 80. So that's pretty much all of Chatham County. That's the Geechee River down here. So Bryan up in here.
So there's none near Tybee.
And again, this is comparing what's on cruisernet.com.
Okay.
Okay, this is just picking those areas that you guys can read about and you're traveling through, and these are safe areas to anchor. What I'm saying is what the department proposes through administrative rule is all of these areas would be open to anchoring, but not within a certain distance around these areas or around a distance around the structure. Okay? All right, so we're almost there, I promise, we're almost there. I wanted to quickly give you a snapshot of where public comments are as of today. 70 public comments through the day. That is, I've been doing this 19 years. That's second only to, well, that's third only to when we did shrimp regulation changes and our entire reform of fishing regulations. So, applaud yourself. Now, I'll tell you, we also got comments from Abacos and from Canada, right? So, they come from all over. A lot of things that folks are covering, right? They don't, they prefer not to stay for a number of days, even if they need a permit. That they don't know when they're coming through on mechanical failures, and so how can they possibly get this permit? That's kind of ignoring the fact that you can get an extended permit, whether they're looking at a day, but you can get a week or you can get a month. They're opposed to fees without services, and I get it, right? I would argue that the service that we're providing for that swim fee is the water quality monitoring that we do in the state of Georgia to maintain our high water quality. That basically comes out of your tax dollar. Any fees that may get imposed here go into the general revenue and come back to us in the form of the appropriation that supports the state budget. Unfair to tax transient boaters, the whole issue of no discharge only, why is it only targeting little boards, which was to your question, sir. Insufficient pump out services. And again, I'll go back to the fact that I know you can't see that slide, so I want to talk about it. There's 19 pump outs in the state of Georgia, but there is a hole in the middle of the state of Georgia, and there's a reason. It's McIntosh County, right? So all you've got is Blue and Hall. I can't even think besides Blue and Hall. What other marinas up there? Not Dallas Bluff and Shelby Bluff. So the number of marinas that you can have up there with a pump out is few and far between. What's some others? The comment that we'll skip Georgia if this passes. And I don't mean to sound flippant about this, but this is my third go around with these regs, and I've heard that, and yet here you guys are. And I'm appreciative of you being here. And I want you to tell, and I'm assuming most of you are Georgia residents, maybe not everybody, but I want you to tell your fellow transients and your fellow voters what a wonderful state Georgia is. And I don't say that without believing it. We are a wonderful state. We're trying to keep it that way, even through regulations like this. And if we believe they're maybe a little too onerous, so let's figure out a way to make them so that they're not, but so that we can continue to protect what we've got. Yeah, we'll skip that one. So, here's where we are today, right? We're at the public meeting in Brunswick. Public comment is due into us by July 15th. We were set to take final action in August, but we already know, via the public comment that we've already got, that we're going to have to tweak the rules somewhat. Which means that in August we'll go back to rebrief the Board of Natural Resources. There will be another public comment period. Now, we may not have another public hearing like this one, but we'll certainly allow an opportunity for more public comment to come in. So we'll probably be in October before we go to final action with this. And so we're at the point now where I get paid a little bit. Because there are so many of us, having a Q&A is a bit difficult. What we're going to do, hopefully I've answered a lot of questions. I'm sure there's more. But what we're going to do is everybody who signed up to speak will get 3 minutes. We hope that you're able to provide your comment to us in 3 minutes. If, as you listen to people deliver their comments, if there's things that you agree with, say, yeah, I agree with that, and move on to your next comment. And we're going to record that digitally, and we're also going to be doing our best to take notes on that. All of this gets presented to the Board of Natural Resources when they begin to consider what the rule says and what we're going to do with the rule. Beth over here is going to have a little paddle, not to discipline you, but not just to keep up with the time. I hope that you are respectful of other people in the room and of their time. Because if we all take 3 minutes, we might be here till 11 o'clock tonight. Except for the first guy who goes, and he usually leaves the room after he speaks. So. Any questions about the process of public commenting? I also should mention that you should have gotten a card, as well as signing into the list, you should have gotten a card. If you write your comment, that's great, because that way I know exactly what you're trying to say, rather than trying to guess based on what you tell us. Everybody good? All right, let me get the sign-in sheet. We have that? Oh. It's 2 pages. Okay, well, I'm going to go down the yeses first. Then I'm going to go through the ladies. And then we will ask about the no's. We'll go through. Okay, first up the bat is Kimberly Russo, and on deck will be Wally Moran.
Thank you, and thanks to DNR for hosting this public meeting so that you can collect these comments. Thanks for listening to them. My name is Kimberly Russo. I'm the director of both America's Great Loop Cruisers Association and the Seven Seas Cruising Association. But I am here representing a coalition of boating associations that was formed several years ago to help preserve anchoring rights at that time specific to Florida. So I'm also here representing the Marine Trawler Owners Association and DeFever Cruisers. And together, those four organizations represent about 12,000 active cruisers. Let me start by saying we agree on, I think, a lot of what the root issues here are. It's just possibly the process of implementation is where we diverge a bit. But we agree that we certainly want clean waterways, and we agree that derelict vessels and abandoned vessels and vessels that are essentially unoccupied on the waterways are hazards to navigation, and they have a possible impact to others' property when they're left unattended. And those are the issues we think need to be addressed through this, and I think that's part of what DNR and the legislator was attempting to do here. The majority of boat owners are very responsible, law-abiding citizens who take good care of their property and aren't going to let their boats become derelict and affect others in that way. We would urge implementation to be delayed until these issues can be worked out, or perhaps corrected to be a little bit more of what many of the legislators may have been intending behind this. But if implementation cannot be delayed, we are urging for anchoring up to 60 days with no permit. That would allow transient boaters as well as Georgia residents to enjoy the anchorages, enjoy the waterways, without the undue burden of needing to apply for and pay for a permit. And it's not just the fees, because I do think what was put out there by DNR was very reasonable, but part of it is just the process of having to get that permit to use the waterways, which are really in the public trust. We would support a monthly permit be required from 61 to 180 days, so up to 6 months, with a monthly permit being renewed. Over 180 days, we would support no anchoring at that point in the same place. So at some point in that time, you have to move. Vessels should not be unattended for more than 7 days, again, because they become a hazard to others' property. And we think all of this as a compromise really gives the law enforcement the teeth that they need to help get rid of some of the derelict and abandoned vessels while protecting the rights of the cruisers to use the waterways. Agree with you, so I don't need to comment too much on the viable anchorages. I think the approach that everything is viable with the exception of certain setbacks. We agree on the shellfish beds, we agree on the channels, navigation channels. We would like to see a 150-foot setback. I think both the 300-foot and the 1,000-foot in the samples are too large. And one thing I would caution is that included on the list we saw that our group did not include is that distance from residences. Haven't studied that, but I think we would need to get a better idea of what that would include, because there are a lot of residences out there and people were anchoring in those waterways before that. So I can hold it there, but thank you very much for the time.
The Great Loop, right?
Yes.
Provided us excellent written comments as well, and thank you for that.
My pleasure.
So,
Okay, so any comments here become part of the official record, but if we submitted them in writing earlier, they are part of the official record as well?
Yes, we have a book of 70 so far and growing. So Wally Moran?
Yes.
Yes, sir. And on deck is Jack White.
My name is Wally Moran. A lot of you know me by my writing in a variety of boating publications. I'm an author. I've been cruising the ICW for 17, 18 years now. Each year I bring down a rally of boats from 15 to 20 boats in what's called the Sail of the Sun ICW rally. So I've got a considerable amount of experience in 35 or 40 trips through the state of Georgia, which is a gorgeous state. And I admire what you're doing, and I agree with you. Your goals are good goals, but the implementation of how you're attempting to do this is going to affect a lot of boaters. And there are going to be a lot of people who are going to say, that's it, I'm going offshore. It's a 20-hour trip in most boats to go around Georgia. And that's going to create some issues for you that I'll come to in a minute. You have mentioned a variety of different setbacks. How do you expect boaters who've never been here before to remember, well, this place is 50 feet, and that was 175, and this one's 300, and I think that was 1,000. Honey, is that one 1,000 feet? Can we go anywhere closer to this? You cannot have a system like that. It's just not going to work. I got you. So in any event, the other thing you have to remember is your problem is not with the transient boaters. Those of us who are passing through your state, we're visitors. We're here for 3 days, 4 days, a week, maybe 2 weeks, and we're gone again. Rules that you make that affect us will drive us from your state. Now, According to the NMMA's Discover Boating Program, something like 13,000 boats a year go south through the ICW. So that's a considerable number of boats, okay? Based on my own experience with cruisers who are traveling regularly, my 20 boats is about 800 feet of dockage. That means that every night, my 20 boats put in $1,600 to some marina in the state of Georgia. If they fuel up, and it's a small amount, say they put 60 bucks worth of fuel in their boat, that's another $1,200 a night. If they go dining out, most couples will spend what, 50 to 100 bucks per couple for dining out? That's another $2,000 a night. If they have to do any provisioning for groceries while they're in the state, that's at least going to be 150, 200 bucks. So what you're talking about for 13,000 boats, you're talking $1,040,000 in dockage, you're talking $780,000 in fuel, $975,000 in dining, and $1,950,000 in provisioning. So in other words, if the average stay in Georgia is 4 nights, you're talking $4 million in dockage, $3.5 million in fuel, nearly $4 million in dining. It's a small industry. The recreational maritime industry in Georgia is a small industry. I am certain that the president of the GAMBA, the marine owners that I know, they don't want to give up a single penny of the dollars that I just talked about here. They want every cent of that. The things that you're planning on doing are going to take people like me and sending us on the Atlantic and around the state because we don't want to put up with the problems. You need to look at this. You need to look at what you're doing. You need to rethink it. You've done no studies. I got that from GAMBA. You need to do the proper studies. You need to rethink this so that it works for everybody, but especially so that it works for the businessmen and the people who work for those businessmen here in Georgia.
Thank you.
Okay, Jack White and Mr. Ed Tillett is on deck.
My name's Jack White. About 18 months ago, my wife and I brought our catamaran back to our home state of Georgia and purchased property, and we're living up off the St. Catherine Sound in the Sunbury area. It's good to be back in Georgia. We just finished about 5 years of cruising, living aboard the boat, and traveling around the southeastern United States. Before that, I was a legislator with the General Assembly in the House of Representatives. And I know a lot of the folks, including Representative Stevens here, and have worked with him, and I appreciate you being here, Ron. It's good to have you. 3 weeks ago, I had never heard of House Bill 201. I heard about it whenever Governor Kemp signed it, and so I did some research, downloaded it, read it, dissected it, and was alarmed at what I had read. And so because of that, I got on the phone and I called some of my former colleagues in the Georgia House. And I'll be frank with you, the legislation wasn't fully vetted. Both sides did not have a voice at the table, is the impression I got. The legislators I talked to, 3 senators, 1 state representative, most of them, they just simply didn't know what the contents of the bill was in its totality. And I know that sounds bad, but you got to understand, being down at the Capitol is like standing on your foredeck in the middle of a hurricane with the wind blowing so fast that your cheeks are wrinkling. You really do, you depend on, to a degree, ethical, good lobbyists that have both points of view presented to you, and the folks in committee. And I just had a real uncomfortable feeling about House Bill 201 and the way that it has shaken out. A lot of the voters that I've talked to feel like it was a sneak attack by the legislature, and I don't feel that way, but that's the impression some folks have. So I would encourage both the board and the department to exercise restraint in the 2020 session. Do not implement the anchoring fee. It's going to drive away business from Georgia, in my opinion. House Bill 201, I've read it. It authorizes, it doesn't direct or mandate the board or the department to do anything. It just authorizes them to do that. I'd like to slow things down and let's revisit this in the 2020 session so we can get a product that we can all live with. Thank you for your time.
but let me do say that the legislation as passed requires anchoring in an area established by the department. So the department at a minimum has to establish those anchorages by January 1st, whether it's the exclusion zones, whether it's anchoring. You're right in that it doesn't mandate the permit, but naturally that's how we intended to proceed in order to get a handle on what the issue is, how many boats are out there. So you're technically correct in that aspect, but we have to institute the anchorages by January 1st.
That's a mandate, not an authorization.
So the way it reads, and I'll tell you, doing this.
Would you please go to the microphone so we can all hear you?
Microphone, Doug, please.
So it's this is line 44, if you got that in front of you.
I do.
Okay, so line 44 states, it's unlawful for any person to dock or anchor at night any vessel within the estuarine area of this state unless it's in an anchorage area established by the department and in compliance with rules and regulations adopted by the board pursuant to this code section or at an eligible facility. So that to us tells us that we have to establish these anchorages by the time this law is implemented.
Line 42 reads, the department is authorized to establish anchorage areas within the estuarine area of the state, as well as areas where anchoring is not allowed.
That is
It
correct.
says you're authorized.
That is correct. We're authorized to do it, and then it says in the very next paragraph that if you're going to anchor at night anywhere other than an eligible facility, it's got to be in an anchorage area. And how do we get the anchorage areas if we don't implement line 42 above that? So, and I just wanted to make sure folks understood that that is a part that we have to get done by January 1st.
Well, exercise your strength.
So to clarify, you have to designate the anchorages, but that has nothing to do with the permitting or the two separate issues. So,
But for
so
us,
you had to get going on that first part, but the second part is where we
and
pump the brakes for it, right?
to take my licks all at one time,
Yeah.
the goal was to move it through at one time. But
The goal.
that's why we're here. That's why we're here. So, all right, so Mr. Ed Tillett, and on deck is Mr. I'm sorry, Sir David Kennedy.
My name is Ed Tillett. I came in from Virginia. I am editor-in-chief and general manager of a publication that's been around since 1947. It's called Waterway Guide. Any of you have been on a boat have probably used our books. Here is the first Waterway Guide from 1948. And we have a section on Georgia. And I'd like, maybe we'll get a chance to read it later. I'm not a carpetbagger. My daughter's a bulldog. All right. My father-in-law is a Rutland wreck. I have trout fished at Tacoma. I have deer hunted in Cohutta. I have boar hunted on Bald Mountain, and I've been in Georgia waters most of my life on and off. I own a boat. A lot of friends in the room, seen some of you at a lot of different events that we've been at. We are adamantly opposed to as much restraint on anchoring and the privilege to drop a hook anywhere in the United States, and especially Georgia. We feel like that this bill was ready, fire, aim, as it came out of the House. And we've looked at it. I am part of the coalition that has agreed to some recommendations about setbacks. I believe that that's appropriate. We also believe that water quality from vessels that are unattended is an issue. But the question that we have, and there are a lot of questions that have been asked, I'm sure, in all of the responses that you've received are follows. What data exists from empirical research that confirms there is a problem in Georgia? Is there a problem in Georgia? How many abandoned and derelict vessels are there in the 150 miles of coastline and all of the marshes? How many vessels have been cited for illegally pumping waste overboard? What evidence exists that water quality is adversely affected by boats who are anchored? What evidence is there? I'm past president of the Virginia Wildlife Federation, was founding member of the Back Bay Restoration Foundation, and I read a study some years ago that said the fecal coliform counts from raccoons and foxes sometimes is greater than that of boats and other vessels. The point that we're making is that choose wisely when you do this bill. You're going to hear a lot of comments, Jack, Wally, what Kim has said. We're simply saying, pay attention to your boaters. Don't ready, fire, aim. And I would ask, do some of the representatives have oyster leases? Is that why they're interested in this? No? Good. So in any event, if you must regulate, and it appears that you feel you must, at least follow some common sense guidelines like some of the agencies and organizations have recommended. This bill is written, and your mandate or authorization has got some problems. Take a breath, work on it, get together with the boating community, and let them help you get through this. You left out a big group when you put this bill together. Thank you.
And on deck is Charlie Waller.
Thanks. Good evening. My name is David Kennedy. I'm the manager for government affairs for BoatUS. BoatUS is the Boat Owners Association of the United States. 650,000 members nationwide. We estimate about 14,000 in Georgia, and again, correct estimate, around 13,000 is the rough estimate for the people who make the trip every year. So, you know, part of our members, one of the keys for our members is the ability to come and go and enjoy the waters where they go, and that's really, so the freedom to enjoy the waters is just one of their overriding concerns, and that's our interest here. We've been actively engaged in the shaping of anchoring policy at both the national and the state level for a number of years, and what we've seen is, as we've reviewed these bills, I'd like to share what our observations and our kind of how we view this. Something overall, we believe that an overriding principle is that any regulations like this need to preserve to the greatest extent possible the range of anchoring options for the responsible cruising boater. Some want to be close to facilities, have that there. Others want to be out on their own to enjoy nature and the great coastline. They want the freedom to choose. So with that perspective, some of the provisions in the draft regulations are very troubling. In particular, the broad restriction, you've addressed that. I think that there is the ability for the board and the department, or really it sounds like the department, to be very targeted in how they set those areas, and they need to think about that carefully. So in essence, open all the waters except for the areas where it's closed. To have an open public process. Georgia has a public meeting system. You need to have that public process as you're setting those individual areas, because that's what's going to be accepted. I think, you know, recreational boaters will accept some restrictions, but it has to be through a clear process that they understand why it's taking place. That's going to be key. And we're also very concerned with the structure and cost of the permits. As far as we know, we don't see that anywhere else for this kind of thing. If you go in that direction, we're not sure you have the authority to do that from a federal perspective, but if you go there, certainly it should only be applied for longer term as a longer term management plan. I think I understand that we're just commenting on the rules here, but I think we also have to talk about the issues of why we're here. And you're already going after things that are illegal. It's illegal to discharge sewage into water in the state. There are, you know, we need you to focus on where the problems are. And so making sure that those boats that are they properly registered? Are they seaworthy? There are those pieces there that the state and the department can get at. It's really, I mean, we've really seen that it's a limited number of boats that are the problem, and that's where the effort should be focused. So we appreciate the time and the consideration. Certainly stand ready to guide this. We can bring the national perspective, and we want to make sure that these are rules that work for everyone. Thank you.
Charlie Waller, and on deck is Neil Davies.
Hi, I'm Charlie Waller. I'm the owner of Isle of Hood Marina in Savannah, Georgia, and I am also the current president of GAMBA. Now, I'm going to eliminate a lot of my first page because, first of all, we have already submitted public comments, and the core of our public comments were joint comments with Kim Russo and all of her groups, and I believe Mr. Ed Tillett also had input in those. So they are identical, and I am not going to try and repeat Kim's comments because I can never do them as clearly and as eloquently as she has done, but I will summarize quickly because it's important. One, we absolutely believe that no registration or fee should be required for transiting boaters or short-term stays, specifically for stays of any less than 60 days. Two, we propose that all of Georgia be open to anchoring except navigation channels, environmentally sensitive areas such as shellfish beds, and following the precedent set in Florida, 150 feet from docks, ramps, and other structures. And we do support limits on anchoring for unattended vessels and limits on long-term anchoring for liveaboard vessels. What's left then, or what is missing here that must be defined by these rules, or as Doug says, other administrative action? Well, obviously the anchorage areas need to be defined. And the current proposed rules for cruisers need a major rewrite, or, in my opinion, boaters will bypass our shores, impacting numerous businesses along our coast. In addition, new rules need to address confusing and aggressive data collection requirements for pump-out facilities. Also, the new law reads that it shall be unlawful to dock a liveaboard vessel at a private dock or non-eligible facility, and as Doug said, that's typically a smaller marina without a pump-out. So if I dock my trawler at my friend's house and I stay on it overnight, have we both broken the law? And in 2020, will every small marina in Georgia unintentionally break the law the first time they accept an overnight cruiser? Talk about an economic hardship for a small business should a significant part of their business become illegal. And my favorite, the new law defines a liveaboard vessel as a human or animal aboard. So if I dock my boat and sleep in my friend's house but leave my cat on board, have we still broken the law? Since it's now a criminal violation, will my kitty be incarcerated? Now, I and the lawyers who reviewed this with me believe that these issues can be resolved with both a careful rewrite in addition to these proposed rules that are within the parameters of the current law. This can be done by prudent use of the flexibility given the department in Title 52-7-8.4K as a king, and by other means. And Doug has already stolen the last part of my speech in that I strongly recommend a Phase 2 comment period. So thank you very much for doing that. Thank you.
For folks who have prepared written comments that you bring up, I'd love to have those copies. They won't come along with your comment card. Okay, so Ms. Davies? Yes. Okay, and on deck is Amy Thurman.
My name is Neil Davies. I'm a part-time resident of Georgia and a very active boater. We cruise through the ICW and off coast on many occasions, and I'm a member of most of the associations that have presented comments today. I want to start by saying I fully support most of the comments that the boating organizations have put forward. They do seem to be common sense. My biggest issue is, first of all, that in the purpose of these regulations, in my understanding, the need for regulations really has not been established. There are existing regulations that cover the issues that have been stated. The Clean Water Act is a very complex piece of regulation that covers everything that needs to be covered here in terms of sewage discharges, etc. And those regulations already exist. Secondly, one of the stated objections is to address derelict boats. But I didn't see any mention in the proposed rules of anything to do with derelict boats. It was just absent. It wasn't there. So I don't see how bringing into effect a permit with a fee is going to change anything. It's just another form of taxation. The permit, there's no study, no plan as to how that money's going to be used or what it's going to be used for. It's just going to go into the state coffers. And I've asked for, if that's been done, and I've been told there is no plan. First and foremost, there's been no study to show that these regulations are needed. And when I tried to find the background to the regulations, I was told that the background is from a meeting that the Board of Natural Resources had in May. And I have a complaint to the representatives here. There are no minutes available from that meeting. There's no way I can find out what that meeting was about, or why it pushed forward the need for these regulations. Finally, my two biggest concerns with this are the establishment of anchorage areas. Anchorage areas are established on the nautical charts. They're already there. I think if the state did a better job of delineating some of the shellfish areas, that was new information to me today. Most responsible boaters would just keep out of those areas. Most responsible boaters follow the rules and are very respectful of the environment and of their neighbours and other residents. And finally, I think that bringing in any of these regulations is going to be just another issue that restricts interstate travel. Bringing in permits, regulations, need to have an internet connection to get a permit, etc. It's just another hassle towards interstate travel that boaters don't need. Thank you for your consideration.
To not go too far down the rabbit hole, but the reason for the permit and how it relates to derelicts is we're trying to get in front of the problem, right? We're trying to identify boaters who are on the hook, and by knowing who they are, we can identify the boats that aren't permitted. We can reach out and try to get those boats permitted so that we stay in contact with those owners one way or the other. A boat becomes abandoned when the owner walks away from it. It becomes derelict when it's sat there for a long period of time. And we're trying to get in front of that problem when we feel like having a permit so that a person has responsibility of that boat on the hook, whether it's attended or unattended, is a way to get there. So just to answer that one. Okay, so let's see, that was Mr. Davies. Amy Thurman. Morning, Amy. And on deck is Edwin Longwater.
Hello, my name is Amy Thurman. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Marine Business Association. I'm also I'm also a local business owner and a coastal resident. The Georgia Marine Business Association has no interest or motivation in supporting any regulations that would discourage the patronage of cruising or local boaters or diminish their enjoyment of all that coastal Georgia has to offer, including anchoring. Our primary goal is, and has been from the beginning, to find a practical solution to the issue of derelict and abandoned boats, and boats left unattended at anchor for months or even years. We have worked closely with key members of several boating organizations to draft wording that we feel addresses this issue without impacting transient or local boaters. That wording has been submitted to the DNR. To summarize, and Charlie's already said this, 150 feet, navigational channels and shellfish beds, opening all of Georgia's waters to anchoring. And we have to strongly recommend the DNR give weight to the opinions of those expressed by these groups to include the boating community and coastal businesses. And we'd also, we would like a second public hearing as well as the comment period. Thank you.
Longwater, and on deck is Lee Gatts.
Thank you. My name is Edwin Longwater. I've operated a business. I'm from Tybee Island. I've operated a business on Tybee for about 30 years as a coastal naturalist. And during that time, I had the opportunity to purchase a vessel named Seamark, which is a 60-foot St. Augustine trawl. I used the trawler in my business, taking guests to Ossabaw, and up and down to Georgia, South Carolina, and into northern Florida on the boat. After I operated the business for 25, 26 years, I retired, and I went cruising for a year down in Florida, and when I came back, I tied at Sasser's Dock, and then later anchored down near Tybee. Immediately, the police were notified that I was anchored too close and I was causing the neighbors problems. I was anchored over a quarter of a mile away. I got the same response from the police, the Department of Natural Resources, the Coast Guard, the Homeland Security Special Task Force. They all said, this is what I want to do when I retire. Well, I'm in compliance with all state and federal laws. I don't pollute the waterways. I encourage people to be safe boaters. And I feel like I'm being discriminated against. I've spent my entire life in Georgia and operating in the marine environment mostly. And now I want to enjoy the coast of Georgia. And the new laws, last year I had to buy a Georgia permit, register my boat in the state of Georgia. It's a U.S. documented vessel. I did that, and now they changed the law saying that I'm a liveaboard, not a cruising boater. Well, I disagree with that. I am a cruising boater, and I simply love the Georgia coast, and I like to anchor around in the Georgia coast, and I don't feel like I should be discriminated against or any other boater discriminated against from using our waterways in an appropriate manner. I also encourage you to establish an anchorage at Tybee. During the hurricane, there were 2 boats that were, kids owned them and they couldn't afford dockage at a marina. Anyway, they ended on the highway and somebody had cut their lines, and an established anchorage needs to be done up and down the coast. Thank you.
Mr. Gatts, and on deck will be Brent Anderson.
All right, well, thanks so much, and I've tried my best to cut down pieces of my comments. It's already been said multiple times, but I appreciate the opportunity. My grandfather always said the number one thing to having a really good speech is to be brief. So I'll try that really hard right now. My name is Lee Gatts. I represent the National Marine Manufacturers Association. I work in the southeast region of the United States. The NMMA is the leading trade association representing the recreational boating industry in North America. Its member companies produce more than 80% of the boats, engines, trailers, accessories, gear used by boaters and anglers throughout the United States and Canada. NMMA recognizes that HB 201 and its mandates will become state law January 1, 2020. However, we request that the regulations needed to implement the new law be written and considered in a deliberate and multi-step process of gathering input from boaters, counties, cities, and individual businesses who may be harmed if fewer boaters stop in their areas. After adjustments are made based on the input, the public should have another opportunity to air its concerns in multiple areas of the state. Unfortunately, HB 201 was enacted, and these regulations were drafted with very little input from the boating public. This imbalance of input resulted in HB 201 mandating several unworkable requirements, and Georgia DNR being tasked with administering them. MMA strongly opposes many provisions in the draft regulations under discussion. In particular, we offer the following concerns and suggestions. The draft regulations in HB 201 require the state to prohibit anchorage everywhere except in designated anchorages. We believe the proposed regulations should be amended to require just the opposite. Anchorage should be allowed in estuarine waters by default, with restrictions put in place only to prevent hazards to navigation and near boat ramps in water structured areas deemed to have specific need for protection, including shellfish beds. These restricted areas should be clearly marked or included in charts. We support a standard setback of 75 feet from in-water structures, shore, and 150 feet from sensitive areas such as oyster beds. If more restrictions provides adequate time for public to comment and official consideration for public concerns. We strongly object to the concept of treating anchorage in Georgia's public waters like a hotel, but we know of no state that charges boaters by the day to anchor in its waters. We do not believe this permit scheme will be enforceable given the severe shortage of on-water patrols and other resources. We expect it to be extremely costly and difficult for the state to provide sufficient education of transient boaters to create even minimal compliance with these fees. HB 201 goes to great length to create criminal penalties for a boater to not purchase and properly display an anchorage permit and or to fail to retain records proving the use of a pump-out facility. Therefore, a person who anchors for a week in a lesser-used portion of Georgia estuary faces a criminal penalty for failure to purchase a $20 sticker. We find it very curious that the legislature established a fee on boaters, but did not designate that the revenue should be used for benefit of boaters. It appears simply to be a tax on boaters that will be paid into the state general fund, where it can be appropriated to support any state government activity. I realize my time. Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
This is Brent Anderson, and on deck, I'm sorry, Fred, I think it starts with M, but I can't. Okay, thank you, sir.
I just have a few questions after the comments that I heard. One that struck out, first of all, I'm Brent Anderson. I have done America's Great Loop. I'm a member of the MTOA, the Motor Trawler Owners Association. I'm a member of the DeFever Owners Association. And I've traveled thousands of miles on the waters of the east coast of the United States and the Caribbean. You mentioned when somebody asked about comments before these hearings, and one of the things that you said was you had a written comment that someone had complained that raw sewage was being discharged in front of their house. How in the world would anybody know whether raw sewage is being discharged from a boat unless somebody was literally taking something over the side of a fishing vessel? There's no way that you could know that. But it discharges out of the bottom of the boat, not off of the side of the boat.
5-gallon bucket over the boat.
And you think a liveaboard is doing that?
Obviously, you don't know all the liveaboards you have aboard.
Obviously, you don't know the cruising association.
Enforce the law against that person.
If you think that it's difficult for you to identify a liveaboard boat versus a derelict boat, I think maybe you need a good deal of education from the boating community. My boat is considerable investment and one that I maintain, and I venture to say that almost everyone that owns a boat and lives aboard does maintain, so that it is in operable condition, so that we're ready to travel, and there wouldn't be any problem discerning my boat from a derelict boat. I can travel up the ICW, and it's not hard to point out, gee, there's a boat that doesn't have a sailboat, that doesn't have a mast. I wonder how long that's been sitting there. That's not the kind of boat that most boaters are using. I don't understand why we would have a law that's based on derelict boats when most of the boats that are easy to identify as derelict boats stick out like a sore thumb. It's not difficult to identify a derelict boat. You said you were on the water this summer. You've seen derelict boats. There's not a lot of them, but they're pretty easy to identify when there's a derelict boat sitting in a swamp. Most boaters do not fit into that category, and we don't need laws to regulate how we use the waterways of Georgia. I would like to know if I heard that there was no facts about what kind of sewage the boating community was putting into water. I would like to know what kind of pollution is put into the water from those homeowners' lawns and from farms on phosphates and nitrates. And is it more or less than the boating community? One final comment. I think a lot of this is regulated, is pushed by people with money that own land on water. Their whole idea is, well, I don't want them near me. That's my property. That's not their property. That's public waterways and it's public trust. If they have a problem with a boater that's too close to them, call the local authorities. You got regulations to regulate this. If you got a boat that's been sitting in front of your house for a few days, you got regulations on this. Use the laws that exist and leave us alone.
Can you bring the microphone to you, sir? Well, I can't get it that far back here. And on deck is Tim McWalter. I apologize.
How about Tim McNair?
McNair, I apologize. I can't read all
That's
this.
close enough.
This is Fred Meyling.
I'm just a person that owns a boat, like many of you that are here. Although I'm represented with MTOA and do a lot with Wally, Moran, and with BoatUS, and I've commented to all of them with regard to this ruling and legislation. And I think that there are two things, other things have already been mentioned, so there's two things that I would like to have to be considered. And one of those is the alternative pumping stations. I know that BoatUS has been responsible for paying for or sponsoring pump out stations that were had alternative means of electric and that were self-serve, and they were in areas that were, you said that there were areas that were under-serviced, and so those areas were, a real problem. Well, there are answers to the problem. We just have to seek answers instead of rules. And the other thing that I think is people are really interested in is where the money is going that is being charged both for permits and the finding process if you're found to be guilty of not following the rules. Thank you.
So let me address, I've heard it a couple of times, and so I'll address it this way. When the initial version of the bill was written, the fees for the permit would go towards the derelict and abandoned vessel process. But the legislative council, who reworked the entire bill, stated that the way that it was worded was unconstitutional. Those fees had to go back to general revenue. So that's the way that a lot of the fees and permits happen when it's a state permit. It goes back to general revenue. Then at the appropriation point in time, I have to go tell the general revenue, the General Assembly, or actually the Office of Planning and Budget, I have to tell them this is how many permits we sold for this much money and request them to add it back into our budget at that appropriate time. But again, that provision was taken out, and I think you heard me say that perhaps we're looking at some alternative fees or no fees as we move forward. So just wanted to address that because it was several times that I heard it. So, and the final yay speaker is Mr. Tim McIntyre. McNair, my apologies.
My name is Tim McNair. Could I ask you a question? How many nice speakers do you have on the roster?
What?
Nay, how many?
How many nicely? You said I'm the last.
You're the last yes.
I'm like,
then I have as many maybes as I had yeses, and I've got as many no's as I had. So
I'm sorry, that's not really my question. If this bill is in the interest of the public, where are the people here that are for this?
Generally speaking, you rarely see the word fake.
Right.
It's the squeaky wheel. You know that.
So
that's generally what happens.
Right. So I'm not a polished speaker like many of the people who've been here before me. I am a retired law enforcement officer, and I do respect the laws of our country because we are a country of laws. But I also really appreciate my freedom. I am also a native of Georgia. Have lived here most of my life, but I chose not to be a resident of Georgia now. We sold our home and we live on a boat, my wife Tanya and I, and that is our residence. And we're on a 6,000-mile journey. We have really a lot of issues with this. We have never put any of our crap in your waters and never intend to. And I don't know anybody that I've met that are true boaters that do that. And you're trying to, address the problem of derelict boats by punishing the people that are bringing revenue to our state. Many of you, if you're not from here, there was a battle back in April of 1778, right there in Fort Frederica, where we defeated the British Navy, captured one of their ships, and we doubled the size of our Navy that day. And I have a feeling if they had to pay a $5 fee to come and anchor while they were doing that, we might not even have the freedom to be here doing what we're doing today. So, on our 6,000-mile journey, I made this here's the places that I know of that my wife and I can drop the hook and not pay a fee. In Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, Maryland, by which we're currently docked, Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Canada, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, and Alabama. All of those do not require us to pay for what should be our right on the waterways of this country to drop a hook anywhere that we wish that is not in a channel and that is not disturbing some type of wildlife or shellfish bed. So I do believe that that the intent of this law is good, and I agree that we need to keep our waterways clean and safe. But I am vehemently opposed to paying a fee to do that. If it comes down to the point where you have to pay a fee, I would make the recommendation that any cruising boaters be given a grace period of 30 to probably 60 days. And then my last issue, someone else brought this up, but if we were to keep a log of our pump out, the typical cruiser that's going up in the spring and down in the fall, we might pump out in Florida, which Florida doesn't require us to log that, and then we spend 4 days in Georgia. We can go 8 to 10 days on our vessel without having to pump out. So if I'm approached and I don't have a log for pumping out, am I in violation of your law? Thank you for your time.
Okay, so that's the yeses. I'm going to walk through the maybes now. Karen Wyrick?
Yeah, okay.
Brandon Wyrick?
Yeah.
Howdy. I'm Brandon Wyrick. I'm kind of on both sides of this. I'm a resident and a part-time boater, but I also see it also from the cruiser perspective. My wife and I cruised on our sailboat, Maine to Grenada, for 3 years, and so we understand the various problems that are associated with that. I had all the great speaking points, but everybody before me stole my thunder, and so I'm not going to go over everything. I'm going to focus on the fee part of it. And first, the other thing I wanted to say is that it seems like most of these issues that you're trying to solve are already regulated already. So you're trying to add laws on top of things that are already federally or otherwise illegal. So, but again, let's focus on the fee. I think the first thing about the fee, it really affects the transients, right? It affects the transient boaters that we just talked to mostly. and that's going to impact the business, as somebody else eloquently talked about. Second, it's not going to fix the derelict boat issue, which seems to be one of the major problems that you guys are concerned about. Quite honestly, I've been up and down Georgia. I don't see the derelict boat problem quite the same way. But this fee thing will not really fix a derelict boat problem. If anything, if I have a derelict boat and I pay my $40 a month or $100 a year, you basically give me a license to leave my derelict boat out there, and now I'm legal. So you're you got to deal with the derelict boat problem a different way. Secondly, as somebody else said, there is no evidence, at least that you've shown us, that this fee would improve water quality. Okay, so I think we are all responsible voters. Don't pump our stuff out. And again, it's against the law anyway, but show us some evidence that there's this major derelict boat, which, I mean, nobody's pumping out if it's a derelict boat, but there's some major liveaboard problem that's creating huge water quality issues in Georgia. Finally, the mechanics of it are really unreasonable. Going to Walmart, you're a transient boater, you stop for an overnight anchorage, you got to get off the boat, go to Walmart or wherever they sell a fishing license and buy a $5 permit. It's unreasonable burden. I would say enforcement is probably going to be near impossible. I mean, we've got law enforcement officers, they got bigger fish to fry out there than checking in on boats for whether they got their license and asking us to print something out and paste it on the window of our boat while we're gone so the enforcement and the execution mechanism does not seem to be there. You're way ahead. Ready, fire, aim on that part of it, right? Finally, I don't see how the fees, I mean, they're reasonable fees. Quite honestly, I wouldn't mind paying it if some of the other things were answered. But I don't see how those fees are even going to offset the cost to manage that. So, look, quite simply, I'll sum it up like this. I feel like you guys are trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist with a solution that won't work, and you're levying it against a group that really isn't to blame for this problem.
Appreciate how much it takes to stand up here and hear something else.
You're doing good.
Truth hurts. Oh, where am I? I am Mr. Steve White.
Hi, I'm Steve White. I'm a Georgia resident, retired soldier, small sawmill owner, and I'm really enjoying my boat. I feel the law was passed without public input or the knowledge of those it impacts. And I think this is a violation of the Georgia Sunshine Act, another Georgia law. I have to display a Coast Guard placard that lays out the laws about waste disposal. Why does the state make laws that double tap the issue? Enforce the laws that are already there. If concerned with water quality, the largest polluter is soil and sedimentation, and so why not regulate agriculture? Or at all. And the money generated by any of these law measures goes into the general state funds. That's been the case for a long time. I also know that DNR received very little of these funds, and which means that you're understaffed, which tells me that any of the funds that are generated from this law are basically just to generate funds. And I work hard for my money. And that's all I got.
Miss Lynn Harden? Mr. Lynn Harden? Sorry, sir. Jim Pankney?
I'll pass.
Charles McNair?
Good evening. My name's Charles McMillan. I'm with the Georgia Conservancy. I grew up in this area, live in Savannah now. I've seen, I'm not a voter. Georgia Conservancy supports the intent of this law. We supported it through the legislature. We're an environmental organization, advocacy organization. We've been in place for 50 years, and we believe in a Georgia where people and the environment can thrive. I have started to see a change in the way that where people are docking and when people are docking, and CRD, DNR deals with a lot of issues, especially after the last couple of hurricanes. And I don't know that this law is necessarily going to solve it, but we're interested in being a part of the solution. I'm hearing a lot of passion around it, and I understand that. But all of us benefit from what has been done over the last 50, 60 years as our Coastal Marsh Protection Acts and so forth have been in place. So look forward to being part of the process, and just remember CRD has plenty to do. They didn't just come up with this out of the, it's obviously an agency legislation or something close to it for their own health. They were trying to solve some problems. So we look forward to being a solution to that. Thanks.
Ms. Janet Davies.
Hi.
Mr. Joe Green.
Thank you very kind. I appreciate it. I consider myself a responsible boat owner, like most of you people in the room here, and I think the people who own derelict boats are not in this room. Preaching to the choir here. So, I'm a lifetime Georgia resident, former member of Georgia Conservancy. I'm proud of what you guys do. And I just want to mainly just echo some of the opinions I've heard today. I'm in agreement with 99% of what I've heard today. But I did have a couple of questions that are troubling me. And when I saw the name there, it said marshland protection. Who's not going to be for marshland protection? I mean, to me, it's disguised as special interest protection. You know, and just the phrasing of the word, you know, just is misleading to what we're here about. And I've heard no one, other than the gentleman who just spoke, who spoke in support of this. Is there anybody in the room who introduced this, or can give us some kind of background? Why do we need this? Why was this even introduced? I'm missing the point. I'm kind of new to it. I will admit, I've only heard that a couple of weeks ago. But if there's someone that can speak in favor of it, you know, tell us what was the research that led to this, like the other gentleman said. I don't know of anything. Yeah.
Don Hogan, who sponsored the bill, is here, and maybe he can speak to that.
Okay, that would be wonderful, because, you know.
Rather than us diverting to this, let's finish our comment.
Okay, well, that was my question. I thought, well, surely someone in favor of this is going to speak and explain all these questions to us. You know, I'm all ears. The other thing, and you know, a lot of boats here are like me. You know, I live in Georgia, but a lot of times I'm up and down the Intercoastal Waterway, you know, multiple times, and you know, I might be in Georgia a week, so 60 days seems extremely long. I've never anchored anywhere 60 days in the same spot in my life, but I'm a transient. That's what I do. So for me, using my holding tank for, you know, I can go 2 weeks without any problem, and I would never dump in the water, and I don't think any of these boaters here would either. So this is unfair, and it's like outlawing all guns because somebody shot somebody, you know, because everybody's guilty here, all the responsible boaters, because of a few, you know, derelict owners or just people who just don't obey the law or respect it. So that's it. I just would like to hear someone explain this to me. Thank you.
If I may, since Representative Hogan is here and he's the person who brought this bill to the legislature,
Maybe we need to hear from Mr. Holden what this is about.
Focus on comments.
Finish the process that we're in.
Okay.
And if Representative Hogan would like to say a few words after that, that's up to him.
I hope he will.
And he suggested that he would. I will tell you that he has supported the department. I'm not going to put words in his mouth. Okay, that was Mr. Green, right? Mr. Green, I'm sorry that where are you? I'm sorry that I completely missed the mark, because that's what I tried to do in the 30 minutes that I gave a presentation, was try to give you a reason why we're there. So my apologies for missing the mark. Mr. Jerry Morris.
Thank y'all very much. Thanks for taking the time to hear us all and hear our concerns, and we appreciate y'all taking the time to have this meeting. Jerry Morris is my name. I live in St. Simons. I'm not a transient boater. I keep my boat at Morningstar Marina. We like to go anchor up the Cumberland. We like to just run around the Georgia watershed. There are so many ambiguities in this bill. I noticed one thing that really caught my attention. You're exempt if you're doing fishing or other similar activities. Now, if I go out and just want to go anchor out for a weekend, am I exempt? Or am I going to have to get a yearly permit since I live here? Questions like that, how is the DNR and their enforcement people going to go out and take into account all these factors? It's pretty much an unenforceable law. It's an unneeded law. You just said yourself, Doug, that we're trying to permit the liveaboards and the derelict boats, and to do that, we've got to permit everybody else in this room. It makes not a lot of sense to me. So thanks for taking the time to hear our comments. Please take these comments to heart. There's a bunch of passionate people out here, very educated people, and there's just really not a need for most of what you guys are doing.
All right, here's what's going to happen. We'll skip this one and get to the end. You haven't spoken, you want a chance. I apologize. I can't read that one.
Might it be Walter Clayton?
Hey, that looks right.
I'm here. Never mind. Good one instead, but I wanted to say.
So you agree with 99% of what
I'm his wife. I have one question. What if I have a composting head?
So that's still no double.
What's that?
Miss Dana Rutland.
Oh, that's me.
Mr. Dana Rutland. Apologies, sir.
Oh, you started wrong with me, brother.
Dana.
I'm Miss Dana Rutland.
Thank you for recognizing.
Man. So my understanding is the focus is the derelict boats. Is that correct? Is that what this is all about?
And dumping sewage.
And illegal dumping. This seems to really miss the focus. If you go on the DNR website, if you got a boat 12 feet or longer, it's got to be registered. If it's not registered, it's illegal. So what needs to be focused on here is what do we do with the boats that aren't legal and that are anchored in our waterways that are causing these problems. Okay? And it needs to be pointed more towards that. But the biggest issue that we all know about is you can create fees and do everything you want to do, but if you can't delegate that money for the purpose it was created for, then you've got the problem that we've got. I'm in the towing business. I tow boats on the water. I moved the derelict boat earlier this week with another member of our group, okay? We didn't get paid a red penny to move that boat. I can work for free every day of my life, but I can't go to the grocery store and get anything to eat, okay? So if you can't come up with the money to fund what's needed to enforce the rules and regulations, we're all wasting our time. Without the resources and the funding, it's all a moot point. Thank you.
legislature convenes the second Monday of January. I appreciate your help come January of 2020. So
Get my sex right, I'll go.
I'll just say that for 2 years, this division received funding for derelict vessels, and it succumbed to the 2006-2007 budget cuts, and it hasn't been restored since then for a lot of reasons.
I didn't do that.
Sure.
But I sent my money in.
Oh, let's see, where are we? That was Mrs. Dana, wasn't it? So how about David Boozler?
That's close.
Apology. You guys gotta write better, I'm sorry.
Never a school teacher.
Name is David Bosworth, and you have no reason to know that and no reason to remember it.
Can you put the microphone near your mouth? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, so I said my name is David Bosworth, and you have no reason to know that and no reason to remember it. I came to Georgia because I was chasing a woman. And I had a boat. And I heard about this legislation, and I asked myself, what's this all about? So I came here to learn. And there's a handful of people here that do know me, and they know that I very often post a word of the day on Facebook. So I'm going to give you my word of the day, and it's convinced. And I think that if I listen to all of this, what goes through my mind is we have some legislators who assign you a job to do. None of us are convinced that the problems that you propose or say are out there really exist. A 5-gallon bucket full of crap getting thrown over board is not a big problem to address. And so, as a psychology professor, we used to say, I will submit to you for your consideration, but one of the things we all need are some facts. We need to be convinced that there's a problem, and I think a lot of us think there's not. We need to be convinced that what is going on in terms of rulemaking will in fact stop those problems. And I can tell you that I don't see a problem, and I can tell you that I don't see a solution to the problems that don't exist. And if there is a problem, and I'm not saying there's not, I'm just saying I'm not convinced there is, show us that problem. And, you know, I signed up with Meyling. Maybe I should have stayed seated, but I'm going to give my minute back to the next guy.
Miss Lynn Anderson. I won't say Mr. or Miss Lynn Anderson. I learned.
Sure.
Lynn Anderson, stay with me. Don Mosier. Leon Strickland.
Me.
Otherwise known as Bubba.
Bubba. That's it. Damn, I never knew your first name. How you doing?
A little bit money now. Name's Bubba. Well, I ain't cut it off. There we go. Still up. All right, my name's Bubba Strickland. I am owner operator of Hogan's Marina on Turner's Creek in Savannah, Georgia. Very familiar with derelict vessels. Very familiar with transient traffic. We do have a few transient people that come through our marina. We're a dry stack marina. We have very few transient slips, but they do come to anchor in Turner's Creek. There's a problem with that because there's too many derelict boats in the anchorage area, which is an unauthorized anchorage area for some reason, we don't know. But I've got the best creek with all the amenities of anywhere in coastal Georgia probably. I've got a grocery store that you can walk to within 5 minutes, a hardware store, restaurants, liquor stores, drug stores, restaurants. I've got everything within a 5-minute walk. I've got a pump out at my facility, which is very seldom used by transient boaters. They go out, they anchor, they dinghy in, they complain about the $10 dinghy fee that I have, which is good for 24 hours, which we want the business. We want the transient business.
We want to see the people come. The problem is that Doug, whoever started this, Representative Hogan, we've missed our target 100% here. The problem was the derelict vessels. You've already addressed the pump out overboard issue. That's already been addressed in another law, if I'm not mistaken. The derelict vessels, I can't find out to this day who is responsible for a derelict vessel. The best help that I've had so far has come out of Chatham County Marine Patrol. Dave Janot is one of their officers, and he is very persistent, and he has got one guy going to court right now. But I was nice enough to remove a vessel this week, and it's tied up at my marina currently. And I've removed it for a homeowner that was down the creek because it was almost about to hit his dock. But now Chatham County's telling me they can't get him for the public dumping now that the vessel's been removed. So we have to have a law that can be enforced. You can put all the laws you want to in effect. If you guys don't have enough people to enforce them, then you need to tell Chatham County they need to enforce them and give them what they need to do it on a timely basis. You cannot, excuse me, you cannot leave a vessel anchored for 3 weeks knowing it's taking on water. I'm watching it go down every day. I'm watching it go down every day. I'm making these phone calls, and by the time they get there, it's sunk. Well, TowBoatUS doesn't want to come get it. CTO doesn't want to come get it because there's nobody to pay. You got to get these problems right when they come into the area. I see my time's up, but I'm going to take another minute anyway. But, I mean, it's just, this has been going on, Doug, forever. There's no way to enforce this. It's not the transient boaters. It's, you know, and fees need to go back to the community. You go into South Carolina, I believe all their fishing fees, any kind of boat registration fees, I believe that all goes back into their fisheries or docks, boat ramps, something along those lines. There's no reason we cannot do that in Georgia without that money going into the general fund. I mean, we've got to be able to fund these type of things. I don't know what the answer is, but it is not the transient boaters. They bring money into the community, and all the money I take from the transient boaters and the Walmart and everybody else, all that gets taxed. That's taxable income for me. The state is getting taxed from all these people out here that have spoken today. But you got to come up with a better answer. There's not a good answer. Thank you.
So, Bubba, I do appreciate you bringing that up, and especially in your marina where that you're stretching the river is a large part of that issue.
Well, there's nowhere for somebody to come in for a night. I mean, there's literally, you know, you can't do it.
Okay, Dustin Hartman?
Can I have it 3 minutes? Can I have Dustin's 3 minutes? Yes, you can.
Mark Mueller?
There you go, ignore me.
I would request if you get any money from this, buy some cushions for these chairs.
Yes.
Yeah, no kidding.
As somebody who has to sit in these chairs for an awful lot of meetings, I can't agree with you.
No one likes a derelict boat or an abandoned boat. But I believe this, like Brent said earlier, is more about the coastal residents with large houses wanting to do something about boats there. That's the first, it's in the first line of something I downloaded off the internet from the DNR today. And then it talks about waste, and that, but I think the waste is a red herring. As far as pump outs, marinas are in business to make money. If a transient boater comes along and they're not participant or